Welcome everyone to the Learning to Birth webinar series, where we interview some of the world's most interesting and inspiring thought leaders on birth and pregnancy. Today we have with us Kathy Fray. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, thank you, Acacia. My great pleasure to be here. Honor, really.
Yes, it's really, really exciting. Okay, so everyone, here's a little bit of an intro on Kathy, and Kathy will tell us more about herself. But Kathy is a best-selling Birth Babies Motherhood author since 2005. Semi-retired midwife, however, you still got your foot in the game, so we'll talk a bit more about that. An international private maternity consultant, and managing director of Midwives products. And of course, Kathy's also founding director and thought leader of IIMCHO, International Integrative Maternity Healthcare Organization Global Summits. We're really, really super happy to have you here, Kathy. Do you want to tell us a bit about your history and how you ended up having the role in maternity care that you do today?
Okay. Well, I guess one of those things in life is that you never really know where you're going to end up. And certainly if you asked me 20 years ago, what's a job that you're least likely to ever do, I would have said anything to do with needles or blood or hospitals. And then I had my own first baby and thought, wow, that's a kind of a cool job, isn't it, being a midwife? And then I had a second baby and I thought, oh, it's an amazing job seeing a baby being born. And then when I was pregnant with my third, I worked out where the local school of midwifery was. And I rang them and said, oh, I'm an adult potential student, how do you get in? And they said, oh, well, do you have any tertiary experience? And I said, what's tertiary? When I think about it now. And they said, oh, you probably need to do some other papers to start with. Anyway, so I did, and I became a midwife when my kids were pretty little, and they're all young adults now, so that's a while ago. But before I became qualified as a midwife, while I was still a student, was when my first book came out, which is called Oh Baby, Birth Baby, Motherhood Uncensored. And it's written, I happen to be a midwife now, but when I was writing it, I was writing as a mother to mothers. And that's, to me, is really important. I mean, now I've got a lot of more health knowledge behind me, and the book's become a bit fatter over the years as I've put more information into it. But principally, it's a mum writing to, it's like, think of it like a big sister or an auntie or somebody like that that's kind of holding your hand through it. So that came out, so that's been at New Zealand's #1 best-selling birth baby motherhood book since 2005. And it just continues to be. So I read somewhere recently that it's estimated that 10% of New Zealand mothers have got a copy or been lent a copy or whatever. So, yeah, so it's kind of become the New Zealand Bible, baby Bible is its nickname, which is great. And of course, so that was interesting, having a best-selling birth book come out when you're only a student midwife. That raised a few eyebrows. But anyway, I went on to be a legitimate self-employed midwife for quite a long time and caught hundreds and hundreds of babies, and had a very high, statistically a very high normal birth rate. My mum sort of became known as the Kathy Fray ladies, because it meant they just had their baby, pretty much. And what I sort of realized over those years is that even if I personally was not attending the birth, my woman still birthed like I was. And what I I found over those years is at the end of the day, it's just about education. That's it. It's not about me being some special person that's in the room and that makes the difference that you can have your baby in a normal way. It's because I've educated them. That's all. It's just the education. So once we sort of clicked to that, I started running seminars called Organic Birth, which is understanding the secrets of natural labor and normal birth. And so even, that just makes all the difference. So as I got eventually a little bit exhausted, to be honest, of being 24/7 on call, always. Then I sort of decided to dial it down a little bit from doing a personal caseload. And so now I do virtual consulting. So often when women, you know, when you go and have your antenatal appointment and you see your midwife or you see your obstetrician, and you kind of come away feeling like you've got more questions than when you went in. But, you know, they can't have you sitting in their office for an hour and 15 minutes talking through every different scenario that you want to ask about. Or, you know, you answer a question and it creates another question. And so a lot of women are doing a lot of Dr. Google, and that's not a great place to be finding out solid answers, especially answers that are actually based on science. So a lot of them sort of tend to be other mums answering questions to other mums. And yeah, so that's kind of where that all is, and it all kind of runs under the umbrella called Motherwise. So but people just go to kathyfray.com or motherswise.com.
Yes, it's an excellent website. Really, really recommend it. It's like this whole encyclopedia of like birth and mother knowledge there. So we can talk a bit more about that later. Now, you come from New Zealand and you've practiced in New Zealand. And New Zealand is kind of thought by many as being a leader worldwide in maternity care. What is it about New Zealand and the system there that sets it apart?
Yeah, it is. New Zealand is regarded as having the best maternity healthcare system on the planet, with sort of second and third would be the Netherlands and Finland. And probably the thing that, well, the one thing that absolutely sets the system apart here is something that we call continuity of care. So in this country, when you become pregnant, you choose your midwife, and that midwife is who you see for all your antenatal appointments, and she attends your birth, and then she comes to your home afterwards. And because most babies in New Zealand are attended by a midwife, it means that we are regarded here as the experts on normal. And we are the experts on normal. And when you're the experts on normal, it means that you know when things are not normal. And that's when we contact our obstetric colleagues, and we do a three-way looking after of that woman. So she's now got the midwife and the obstetrician that she's looking after in a three-way combination. And very, very rare circumstances, a midwife will fully hand over to an obstetrician, but we're talking about a woman who is probably incredibly sick. It's a woman who's got a lot of big complications. You know, I can think of one client that I ever handed over fully that I no longer looked after because she was just so medically complex. But yeah, so that continuity of care, of the having the same person that knows you and that you get to know, is rare. Most countries in the world, when you're pregnant, you go to your local antenatal clinic and you see whatever midwife or doctor is on, and then when you're in labour, you arrive at birthing suite and have whatever midwife is on. And not that many countries do home visits for postnatal. So yeah, that's why New Zealand, and also New Zealand midwives have a very high level of autonomy as well. So we make a lot of decisions. But pretty much really the only thing we don't do is cesareans. Most of the obstetricians would do the instrumental deliveries, ventouse and forceps, but certainly in some more remote locations, midwives will do those as well.
So mums can contact you from anywhere, New Zealand, but also around the world, Australia and other places.
Absolutely. So because we've got such a good system here, my international clients, well, my clients are not particularly Kiwis. They buy my book and they've got their fantastic system, and that's pretty much all they need. Yes, so my international client is mostly Australian and North American, so Canadian, from USA, and a lot of Sydney and Melbourne, and sort of a lot of remote Australia as well, you know, where they're geographically a bit more isolated. So what I do is there's sort of different levels of support depending on what the person needs. And some women just join my Essential Basics, where they get login access to a lot of sort of extra stuff on my site. And they catch up with a live webinar once a week, where they can ask any questions that's sort of accumulated that week. Or then you've got clients who actually just have one-on-one with me as well. Yeah.
That's fantastic. If a mum's or a mum-to-be is contacting you and looking for support from you as a kind of, you know, professional consultant, what are some of the things that you'll cover with her, like that first time that she'll reach out to you?
It does definitely depend on her gestation. That's like the key thing, you know. So if somebody's contacting me at 12 weeks, which is fabulous because we've got all the time, we're going to be able to go through everything in plenty of time. But if somebody's contacting me after 34 weeks, we've got a massive catch up to kind of do, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff that we should have spoken about by now, so I tend to do, like, if they're after around about sort of say 32 weeks onwards, then what I tend to do is a couple of bigger sessions, one where we'll just do a catch up on a lot of general topics, and then we'll do a separate session where we're just talking about labour and birth, and get all their birth support people there, or personal people. That's really critical, that everybody's hearing the same thing and everyone's on the same page. So that, you know, when that woman is in labour, it's not her partner saying, oh, the Kathy said this, and the mother-in-law is going, oh, I don't think so, you know, and all that kind of stuff. That's hard on the woman. So just having everybody together just for an hour, honestly, it just makes this enormous difference. And I'm not here to correct the opinion of their midwife or their obstetrician. That's not my job. My job is to really just answer the questions that that woman has, which they always do have. And sometimes, or a lot of the time, to be honest, it's just they get this level of reassurance, because especially when I end up saying exactly the same thing, you know, that their actual the health professional told them, and they're like, but sometimes when you hear it a second time and you hear it explained by a different person in a slightly different way, everything just makes more sense. And once in a while, it's not so much, to be honest, in the Western countries, but certainly a little bit with Asian countries, with expats who are like maybe giving birth in Thailand or something like that. And yeah, sometimes I might actually question what their medical professional has said to them.
I've seen some interesting posts on Facebook mum groups, people giving birth from interesting places and saying, this is happening to me here, is this normal? And I'm just going, no,
that's not normal. Because there are, I mean, the thing is that best practice is something that constantly, you know, evolves and changes, and new research shows new things. And so we do have countries that are kind of dealing with research that might be 20 years old, and that's just the culture of that hospital, and that's what they've always done. And so the expats get a little bit, sometimes I might challenge what they've been told, or suggest they challenge what they've been told. But certainly generally within the Western countries, it's more about just answering the questions with actual medical understanding.
Yeah. What are some of the questions that mums frequently come to you with? Is there a pattern?
I would say during the pregnancy, it would always be something that was said to them that made them leave worried. And they just want reassurance as to how much they should be worried or not worried about that sort of thing. And it's just one of the commonest things I hear, which is like just is when radiographers doing ultrasound will make a little tiny comment, and that sits with that woman, and she's freaking out about it. And they might just say something like, gosh, the head looks quite a good size, doesn't it? And now that woman's just thinking, how do I get this baby out? You know, and and then if we look at the head circumference and we check it on a customized growth chart, oh, that baby's sitting at the 70th centile. It's absolutely normal. It's not at the 98. It's not a large for dates baby. And that's what they need to hear. It's like, oh, I said, well, you know, it's like everyone between 10% and 90% is normal. And you're in there. It's a normal size head. It might just be that your baby's head is a bit more round, but like I've got a round face. It's not an oval face like my husband. And they go, oh.
That head will shape itself anyway. When you see the pictures of babies just post birth, and their heads are the most bizarre shapes.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So amazing, because then they seem to pop back, you know, really quickly. It's like, but babies' heads is
absolutely within 24 hours. Yeah, because I mean, their skulls are designed for the bones to cross over, and that's how. Oh yeah, the bone down.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So often when a baby's born, there'll be quite a ridge down the middle, and that's because one of the bones popped over the other. It's all designed to do that. That's why they have fontanelles, so that it can squeeze in there's space, and then it squeezes out.
I'm just like mind blown. I know their heads did all sorts of interesting things, but I had no idea bones do that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, especially if they've been what we call OP or posterior lie, then they can get a bit of a cone head. But it all pops back and it's all as it should be. But again, you know, if somebody's not explained that to you and your baby comes out with this cone head and you're like, oh my God, I've given birth to an alien, you know, it looks like something off a sci-fi program. And people go, and of course, everybody in the room is going, oh, isn't your baby beautiful? And you're thinking, no, it's not. What is that? I remember actually, it's funny the things that when you go through it yourself, and then you know, you can be in that other person's shoes. And I remember when our middle one was born, and I didn't, because our eldest one was a full 2 weeks past the estimated due date. So they're more mature, basically, whereas the middle one wasn't. And so she was born with a little bit more hair or lanugo on her body, which is absolutely normal for babies. You know, but it can kind of come down their forehead and down their temple. And I'm just looking at it thinking, it looks like a baby monkey. And straight away, the midwife...
We've got waxing, it's okay.
Oh my God, I was thinking, oh, we're going to have to spend a fortune on waxing, and it's a girl. And it's straight away, you know, the midwife knows what you're thinking. And she just goes, honey, you know, it's just baby hair, it all falls out. And we're kind of like, oh, thank God. But there's so many silly, just things that when you understand and when somebody explains that, you don't worry anymore. It all makes sense, and it all has a reason, and it has a purpose. Whereas, say, for example, if you'd had a baby that was born with this great big ridge down the middle where this skull plate is lower than that skull plate, well, you would be thinking, because nobody's told you that that's what they do, it's perfect, that's called molding, then you could freak out and go, oh my God, my baby, is it okay? So with antenatal, it's all about reassuring the woman from something that they've been told or something that they've read, or a prognosis or diagnosis that they've been given. You know, oh, I've been told that I've got gestational diabetes, you know, oh my God, and they're bawling their eyes out thinking it's the end of the world. And we have a conversation and they realize it's not. And then afterwards, it's always about infant sleep and breastfeeding and why they cry.
Yeah.
So it's the same questions, you know, and in fact, I always sort of have this measurement that by day 22 is usually when the woman will say to me, now we're having a few challenges with the sleep. And I always giggle because it's like, that means the breastfeeding's all fine. Right?
Yeah,
the breastfeeding's now out of the way.
If you want to sleep, don't have a baby. That's all the only advice I can give you. You want to know how I have these bags under my eyes? It's from motherhood. No.
But so
we
much,
want.
and again, it's like, you know, those second time parents, and because the first time with a baby, they tend to use what I call the winging it approach, where really they have absolutely no strategy. They really didn't read much about infant sleep physiology, but maybe nothing. How hard can it be? It's just a baby. And so they keep, it's like whack-a-mole, you know, and it's just like, oh, we'll try that, we'll try that, we'll try that. And it's crazy. And then they kind of get to that second child, and maybe their first child is 2.5 and is still sleeping in their bed and not sleeping through the nights and things. And they'll go, we are not doing that this time. We are doing things differently. And, you know, then they empower themselves and they get out the books and they learn and they find out techniques. And but it all really does start in that pregnancy. And when a woman has a really great, enjoyable pregnancy, and where she's not worrying because she feels informed and she understands what's going on, and then she's fully empowered to have that lovely, normal, natural labour that ends in a normal birth. No ventouse, no forceps, no C-section, no fetal distress, no obstructed labours. And hey presto, guess what? The baby feeds way better when they've had a lovely normal birth. And so then her breastfeeding goes better, plus she's not recovering from a horrendous, you know, major abdominal surgery or failed ventouse and a full episiotomy or whatever else that she could be going through. And it just, everything goes better. When you've had a nice birth and your breastfeeding works well and your baby's sleeping well, you don't get postnatal depression. It's really rare.
Yeah. Let's talk cesarean, because I know obviously you encourage your mums to try and do it for themselves and empower them, you know, with information. But there are a lot of mums I see on Facebook forums just going, hey, I'm having an elective cesarean. I know, you know, who else is here doing it? And I know that the rates in most hospitals in Western countries, you know, it's a lot of elective cesarean. But why would you recommend a mum to sort of really contemplate that choice and whether it's right for her?
Well, firstly, I think she should put the baby first. Is it the best thing for the baby? No, it's not. So we know that. She has a 10% chance of having a complication. It's major abdominal surgery. I know it's reasonably common and most women recover okay, but you have a 10% chance of a complication for you or the baby. That's high. You know, that's really high, 10%.
What sort of complications can arise? Because, you know,
with the woman, it would be
what's going on?
Yeah, generally with her, it would be to do with the recovery, infection, because I mean, any surgery can have risks of complications, right? But particularly when you're sort of dealing with the abdomen and that whole general area, oh my God, there's just endless things that can go wrong. They've accidentally nicked a ureter or nicked the bladder or punctured a bowel. I mean, all these things, you know, shouldn't happen, but we're human beings performing, you know, it's not robotic surgery. And some women's, and especially when you've got a situation of fetal distress, you know, the priority is to get that baby out. And, you know, I've certainly seen some pretty fast deliveries. And, you know, the last thing, what they're thinking about is the baby, and we can fix the mother later, you know. But so there's a lot of complications there. For the baby, the complication, the biggest common one is respiratory distress. And that's because a baby needs labor. There's important hormones that occur in labor which get the baby ready to get their lungs ready for breathing air, like being in the extrauterine environment rather than the intrauterine. And even if a woman has had labor, but then it ends as a cesarean, the baby still has received a lot of benefit. But when there's absolutely no labor whatsoever, you would have, I don't know what the stats would be on it, but I would say it would probably be around a 1 in 5 chance of respiratory distress on the baby. It's high. It's high. They also, it also because they haven't been squeezed through the vagina, through that birth canal, and there's about 100 mils out of each lung that gets squeezed out during that. So the lungs are still wet when they're born, but not nearly as wet as they are with a cesarean where they haven't had that. So they just suffer from wet lungs, and so they can often sort of end up in NICU or SCBU. They go either one way. They're there for a few hours or they're there for a few days. It never seems to be an in-between. They're there for a few hours and they come right, or it takes them a few days. So when a woman says to me, what is it that I can do to give my baby the best birth it can have, the best start in life? Well, that's a no-brainer. That's a natural labor with a normal birth. That's the healthiest thing you can give your baby. But the byproduct of that is that when the mother has done everything in her power to give her baby the healthiest start for the baby, well, guess what? She's just had the best birth for her too. So rather than, I think that before you meet your child, you tend to be thinking all about the fact that it's your birth, but it's their birth. There's just that sort of subtle difference. And, you know, a year later when they have their first birthday, well, yeah, everyone's forgotten about the fact that it was you giving birth. It's all about their first birthday.
No one ever remembers the mum. Come on. And I'm like, you not only that, but birthdays are, oh my God, the most work of the year, because you've got to do the cakes, the parties, the presents, the managing the friends, families, managing family visiting, managing, oh my God, everything. And you're just thinking back like, this is the day that's, you know, 6 or 10 years ago, I was there doing this. And it's,
that's right. And no one does see, yesterday was our youngest's 18th birthday. And you're an adult at 18. Did anybody on this planet ask me, how was the birth 18 years ago? No. Or I remember when my nephew had his 30th, and I pulled him aside and I said, you know what else happened 30 years ago today? And he's like, what? And I said, your mother became a mother. And he's like, oh my God, Auntie Kathy, you're such a midwife. Anyway.
You've got to start a new tradition. You've got to start a new tradition, Kathy. This is a whole new website, a whole new global movement we need to do of birthdays are no longer, like we've got to do a mum celebration. Like they get a massage or something even before. Because I mean, like the birthday happens and then you're cleaning up for 2 weeks afterwards, like all the party.
Yeah, but you know, the funny thing is that when it is their first birthday, you know, like we are finding them that best little outfit to wear, and we're putting all this effort in, and yet when we're pregnant with that first, it's all about my birth, my birth, my birth. And it's not, it's their birth. So when somebody says, oh, I think I'm going to have a cesarean for my birth. So you want to give your baby a cesarean. That's not the best start.
Yeah. And
I don't mean it from and I really don't mean it from like a guilt layering perspective. I don't. It's just more awareness. Hold on. I know that you're going to give birth, but this is their birthday. And I think that women probably in general don't realize the benefits to the baby. So once you do sit down with them and you explain it, and that's the thing that, you know, when I do deal with women for, you know, months and months leading up, we have such an opportunity to go through so many things. And I can't tell you the amount of times that a woman might have said to me, oh, by the way, I'll tell you right now, when she's like 12 weeks pregnant, you know, I'll tell you right now, I'm booking the epidural. So I'm just telling you, Kathy, that's what I will be doing. And, you know, but then 7 months later, she doesn't want that because she's learned more and she's realized all these differences and she's making informed decisions. I'm not anti-epidurals. I'm just anti-women choosing them when they haven't a clue what it's going to do to the chance of them, their baby having a normal birth. It's not traumatic. It's not traumatic. And it's not an emergency delivery.
What are some of the things that, because obviously there's a lot that a woman needs to educate herself about for birth, but there's only so many things you can learn about. What are the priorities when it comes to birth education? What does a mum really need to know?
Oh, that's a really good question. Come to kathyfray.com. But more than I've layered it in there. I think that I am hugely convinced that it's about layering. And it's not about going to your one set of routine antenatal classes. Look, if you want to go to routine antenatal classes alone and that's all you're doing, well, expect routine results. But anybody that's watching this is already not in that category because they've gone a little further, right? They're wanting to know a little bit more. So what we do is I have a free download called Organic Birth, which is a little 8-page guide to understanding the secrets of natural labor and normal birth. So that's kind of like a real tiny little starting point. But for those who, you know, to me, what I want to be able to give women is the free guide and the chapter in my book on labor and birth, because I think, in my obviously biased opinion, that it's the best chapter that you can read on labor and birth.
Is that your Oh Baby book?
Oh Baby book? Yes.
We'll chat afterwards. I'll make sure I've got all the links to what you want women to.
Oh, cool.
To see.
Yeah. And it's just because, I mean, you know, it's got all of my wisdom is in there. You know, I've piled it in there. It's everything I could tell you. But then I've also done like a video version. So I've got a 90-minute organic birth video. So this is where I say people should layer it. So what I recommend they do is they get the download, because the download is basically there as your dot point summary, which is what you refer to when you're actually in labor. Because you can't refer to a 50-page chapter when you're in labor. You need dot points. So it's about read the chapter, watch the video, read the 50-page chapter, watch the 90-minute video with your birth support people. Have you heard in, like in America, how they have the rehearsal dinners, you know, before people get married and they all get together? Well, I talk about the rehearsal birth. So you sit down with your partner and your birth support people. Everybody's going to be there, and you all watch the video together. It just makes such a difference. And then there's other books that I recommend, and other blogs and articles on particular sort of subjects. So, you know, I've got one just about vitamin K and just about delayed cord clamping and all those like sort of pieces of topics as well. And so I'm trying to provide it so it's really a one-stop shop. But there are certain things that I personally recommend that I don't do. Like, I'm not a trained hypnobirther, so I don't teach hypnobirthing. However, I know a lot about it, and I've had loads of clients use it. So I guess what you'd say is I'm in a, I used to be on like a website where if you wanted a midwife who knows hypnobirthing, you know, I'd be one of them. But yeah, so there's lots of other sort of tools along that, but it is about layering, and it's about starting early, you know. Really, by the time you get to that third trimester, you should be well on the way of starting your education. I would say anything from 24 weeks onwards. And you should know your stuff by 34, 35 weeks. That's it. You should be totally ready, because remember, 1 in 20 babies, that's quite a lot, arrive early. So that's before 37 weeks. Yeah.
You brought up two things that no one else, I don't think, on this webinar series has spoken about, and yet which I was informed about and I practiced during my births. You've mentioned vitamin K and also delayed cord clamping. Do you want to just speak briefly about those two issues and what your perspectives are on each of those? And because one
of the things that I kind of pride myself on is that I'm not here to tell you how to do things. I call it middle path. So what I like to be able to do is give people the information on that side and the information on that side, and you make the decision. But the difference is, because it is an informed consent kind of decision, but I guess the difference is that when I was in, which is what prompted me, one of the things that prompted me to write the book in the first place, is that when I was a mum and not a midwife, I felt like I was making all these informed consent decisions on information I wasn't actually feeling informed on. I thought, you know, I'm an intelligent, articulate woman and I don't get it. Like, I don't, you know, and you're just Googling it and, you know. But there are occasions when I do have a strong opinion on something, and when I do, I'll say, I've got a strong opinion on this. You don't have to agree with me, but I have. So with regards to vitamin K, I think one of the things to realize is just sort of the statistics around it. So vitamin K being given to newborns has been around for a long time. So we've got really good data on it. And basically what we're talking about is preventing a rare occurrence. So what happens is when the baby is born, it's absolutely normal for with the whole birthing process that there's a few little tiny capillaries within their brain that might sort of burst along the way, and the baby's completely designed to cope with that. It's not a big deal. Look, if you kind of think of it like you know, you fall down and bang your arm and, oh, you got a bit of a bruise. Well, you're designed to cope with that, right? So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But in rare circumstances, there are babies that have an abnormally low level of vitamin K. And vitamin K is one of the cofactors that you need for blood clotting. And so basically those babies can die, or they can get brain damage and potentially die. And so when people do not give the baby any vitamin K, then that baby has a naturally a 1 in 25. Oh, sorry, 1 in 500, I should say. They have a 1 in 500 chance of having hemorrhage disease. So that's just the stats. That's what it is. It's 1 in 500 out of babies are born with this unusually low ability to clot their blood. But if you give them the oral vitamin K, that improves it to 1 in 25,000. Or if you give them the injection vitamin K, that improves it to only 1 in 500,000. So, yeah, so that's always, that's basically what it's about. And so sometimes people will say, oh, but if the mother has a lot of food that's vitamin K rich, that will help. Yeah, not really. Breast milk is notoriously low in vitamin K, to be honest, even if she does have a lot. And by that stage, the baby could have already had that brain bleed. Yeah, so it's a tricky one. But I did a few years ago have clients who lost a baby. It was born prematurely, and they were very naturopathically minded, and they'd made the decision that their baby was not having the vitamin K. And it was that 1 in 500 that needed it, and the baby died at a month old. Yeah. So I guess that's where you kind of, as any health practitioner, any situation, what you personally see with your clients sort of impacts your practice. So I would have to say that, you know, I would always respect somebody's decision not to give vitamin K, but there would be a piece inside of me thinking, please don't be that 1 in 500, please don't be that 1 in 500, because I've seen the tragedy of that. Yeah, so that's a little bit that. With regards to delayed cord clamping, that's a very on-trend thing. And I think that the thing to,
I'll just say something there. So 13 years ago, I've got a teenager now. I had my son, and that was a hospital birth, obstetrician birth, all of that. But I was really fortunate to have a doula, you know, who did tell me about all these different things. So she told us about delayed cord clamping. And so I don't know, maybe we were the first baby in the hospital to have it. I don't know, because my obstetrician was just like, oh, we could do it for 5 minutes, but no more kind of thing, right? And but my son had his 5 minutes of delayed cord clamping. And you hear nowadays of like hospitals letting you have like 2 hours of delayed cord clamping, you know, totally different scenario. But back then, I'm hoping things have changed now, because I can't imagine why you would cut it while it's still bleeding.
Well,
you tell us
again, it kind of comes down to best practice and
Yeah.
habitual cultural practice. So we were chatting before we went live about the difference. There are some quite significant differences in the maternity healthcare system between New Zealand and Australia, which is why I have a lot of Australian clients, I think. So basically in New Zealand, and really for anywhere in the world, certainly in England and anywhere that's up to date with their medical journals, when you've had a woman who's had a normal, a natural labour, a normal birth, so there's no oxytocin drips, there's no epidurals, there's no risk factors for her to hemorrhage, so she doesn't have low platelets, she doesn't have an extra large baby, she doesn't have low iron, she doesn't have twins. So there are certain things that we know can make this woman have a much higher chance of bleeding, and women can bleed out a lot in a really short time. Like, honestly, just turn a tap on, that's what they can do.
I did that with my second birth. It was a really fast birth, so we did kind of delayed clamping, but we might have made it to 5 minutes with my second.
Yeah, it's a woman can hose, really. So there's a lot of sort of different pieces to it. So what has happened over the years within the hospital system, it became very, very commonplace for as soon as that baby's head was crowning, not even when the baby was out, to be honest, but as soon as the head was crowning, they would give the woman an injection of oxytocin. And then as soon as that baby was born, get the cord cut, clamped, and get that placenta delivered by controlled cord traction, because until that woman has an empty contracted womb, she has a risk of bleeding. But of course, over the years, our ability to manage hemorrhaging has improved as well, and we've got oxytocic drugs that will help us to assist that womb to stay well clamped, so that we can control her, get a better control of her bleeding. So I think sort of over that time, there's really emerged the ability to think about delaying the cord being cut. But also what we've realized over the years is that if we don't fit, it's like the whole thing, don't fiddle and you don't create problems, add an epidural and oxytocin, and you've got all these other things, and the same thing afterwards. So when a woman has had a natural spontaneous unassisted labor and she's had a normal vaginal birth, then the default mode should be a physiological birthing of that placenta, which means not cutting the cord. We don't cut the cord for a physiological birthing of the placenta. That's how you do a physiological birthing of the placenta. You don't cut the cord. It's just how it is. But when you've got a person who maybe has been working on breathing suite for decades and decades, they can still find it kind of nerve-wracking, because it's like, well, no, I can't, until that placenta's out, I don't know that woman's not going to bleed. And I've certainly had that situation where a woman is not even appearing to be bleeding at all. There's like basically nothing coming out. Actually, she's hemorrhaging quite wickedly, but the placenta is acting like a plug. And when the placenta comes out, suddenly there's another couple of litres of blood. So it's all kind of gets a bit complicated. But we do know that with newborn babies, with premature babies, that if they are able to have their cord pulsing for a bit longer, that extra load of blood that they receive does give them some benefits. To be honest, the science on it doing it for a full-term baby isn't good. We are assuming that there's some benefits. We talk about that you can get more iron on board. Well, that's because there's four iron molecules in every hemoglobin cell. But babies are born with more blood cells than they need, which is why they get jaundice, because a few days later they start to break down those blood cells. So I guess what I'm heading to is that on one side, to do a physiological birthing of the placenta, we don't cut the cord anyway. So there is, it's delayed cord cutting. Like that placenta will come out half an hour later, an hour later, whenever it happens. Then you cut the cord, or you don't cut the cord and it becomes a lotus birth. If you've got a woman who has got risk factors for bleeding, or she's actively bleeding, we need to cut that cord. We need to get that delivered. But in most cases, there just doesn't have to be the rush, you know. And if the cord does need to get cut quite quickly, I think what's important is for that woman to know her baby has not missed out on something that was critical, that's going to make a terrible difference to the rest of their life. Certainly not being exclusively breastfed and using formula does, we know that makes big differences to the baby as an adult. But whether their cord is delayed or not because of other circumstances that are going on in that birthing suite at the time, it's an ideal scenario, but it's also not a big deal if it doesn't happen, you know?
Yeah.
Because I've had women that have felt guilty that their first baby didn't have it and their second baby did. I'm like, they're fine. You haven't done some terrible thing.
Oh my God, our capacity as mums to go over and over things and go, oh, I could have done it better. And to be honest, we're always doing the best that we can with the knowledge that we have at the time. And you know, websites like yours are so awesome, you know, so that mums can have that bit more of information and make decisions that are more in line with, you know, what they want out of, you know, their motherhood. And
I'm just all about getting mums empowered, and they just know then they can make an intelligent decision. That's all. I also get like really, really frustrated at the government sort of information that's put out to pregnant women, because I find that it's very dumbed down. It's kind of, you know, and I guess they have to sort of get it right down to the level of someone who maybe English is their second language, you know. They have to go get really, really, really simple. But there's a whole lot of other women out there going, well, actually, I would like to understand this better. I heard a statistic recently that in Sydney, I might be wrong, but this is what I was told, is that in Sydney, you know those suburbs that run from like Darling Harbour through to Bondi? I don't know all the names of them, but they're the wealthy suburbs, right? That area in Sydney now has the lowest immunisation rate in Sydney. And I'm not going to hear about the arguments about immunisation, but the thing that's interesting about that is low immunisation rates used to be associated with lower demographic and lower education. But this is the most highly educated areas. And this is because women are Dr. Googly, they want to know, they want to understand. They don't trust everything that the medical science is telling them. They want to know for themselves and make those decisions. So I guess that's my clients. They are people who have an above average desire to understand what's going to happen to them and their baby, and they want to do the best thing for their baby, which ends up being the best thing for them as well.
Where can people follow you online, Kathy?
Just kathyfray.com. So just kathyfray.com. And you can, on the homepage there is, you know, not very far down, there's a form you can fill out to get my free download, my organic birth. And that's probably the best thing just to start with, because that's, and then, you know, there's, I then can explain about loads of other different resources that are on the website. There's a section that's just called resources, and there's a lot of free short podcasts and short webinars on there. And then my members area has got longer ones where we deep dive into topics, where people pay a subscription to belong to that.
Fantastic. And it's actually really affordable if you look at the rates on Kathy's website. I think for what Kathy's offering, it's a really great thing just to put yourself and your baby first for a few months at least.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think, I mean, depending on what package people invest in, you know, it's probably the equivalent of like 2 or 3 cups of coffee a week. To give them 24-hour access to my, like one of the things they get access to is my online Q&A library. I've got 600 Q&As on there. All they have to do is put in the search bar one word like breastfeeding or something, and up come all of the questions and answers. And I say to women, look, if the question that you're looking for is not there, let me know and I'll add it. And I haven't added one for a while. So we just have having that at 3 o'clock in the morning is just such a godsend. If you just get one answer on something, you're like, oh my God, that was worth $100 to know that, you know, that sort of thing. It's just all about peace of mind.
Well, it's as a mother who's gone through this and can speak, you know, sometimes you can spend hundreds of dollars or more than that after birth just trying to find the answers to things like why things have gone wrong and how to heal from things.
Right, because
the investment that you put in beforehand, if it's $10 a week compared to years of healing and agony and trying to get therapy and oh my God, all the things that you can go through healing. Just spend the $10 beforehand. Do it.
It is right. And the crazy thing about it, Acacia, is like so often, you know, there's kind of like this no hesitation to go and spend $1,000 on a pram or, you know, $800 on a card, and then I say, oh, we'll spend $10 a week on this. Oh, you know, we'll have to talk about this. Should we have $10 a week? Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh, this is the best part of the day. Get a secondhand car and get some really good advice. and as I say, peace of mind.
So true. No, I think that like with my first baby, I spent thousands, right? And I was working at the time, so fair enough. It was my money. But with second baby, because I didn't have any of that anymore. Long story where that went. But with second baby, I was like, right, little secondhand rocker, secondhand breastfeeding pillow, $40 sling. And I didn't even buy a pram for that because I knew for the first few months I'd be carrying the damn thing everywhere anyway.
Yeah, I know, right? And, you know, I'd often say that to people and they're like, oh, do you think I should do this hypnobirthing class or not? And I'm like, buy secondhand stuff for the baby and do your hypnobirthing class. Because if you have a second baby, it's all secondhand already anyway.
That's it.
I think the two things I always say, the two things that you must find new is a car seat, unless you know the history of the car seat. Because if a car seat, you know, if somebody's had an accident in their car seat, sometimes they can have like little tiny fractures. You want to get a new car seat. Okay. So a new car seat and new mattresses and any bedding, cots and bassinets. If it's secondhand, get a new mattress. But as long as you've got a new mattress and a new car seat, everything else can be secondhand. And then go and invest in better education and better resources and have more time off work, you know. And it's kind of like, why are the women working up till 37 weeks so they can paint the nursery? What your baby would prefer to do is have an unpainted nursery and you stop them working at 32 weeks, you know. So it's kind of just getting the priorities in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fantastic speaking today, Kathy. I've learned so much, and it's always amazing to know that there's this new well of wisdom and knowledge out there, because, you know, this sort of thing that you've got on your website 13 years ago, I would have loved it. Was it there? No. And now mums can access it and not have to go through like some of the things that, you know, I and other mothers went through, because they can just learn from the, you know, off the top with you. And
that's right. Like and it's also that a lot of the resources out there are not always written by qualified health professionals. So, I mean, doulas offer wonderful support, but they haven't done 4 years at university and 18 months doing a new grad program. You know, like I'm 6 years into their education before you're really kicked out the door and said you can do it on your own. There's a lot of knowledge in there. So the doulas are fantastic as birth support. But having that sort of taking it from that level of being a mum's group, which is just mums to mums opinion, and then getting it up to the next level of a doula, which is fantastic because they're professionally trained birth support people, but getting it up to that level of actually a senior midwife, I actually, and we couldn't have done stuff like this as midwives, and you know, until there was virtual internet and podcasts and webinars and all this. Yeah, like it's new technology making it. And I actually think that I'm just pioneering something that will probably become completely normal. And, you know, in 10 or 15 years from now, you'll have all these amazing midwives who've been midwives for 20 or 30 years, and they just don't want to do night shift anymore. And they've caught thousands of babies and they've got all this amazing information. And people go and use them virtually as their additional kind of personal consultant that they, it's like you go to the gym and you see a fitness instructor, and you may have a mentor for your business, and you might have a life coach for your life goals. Well, of course you have a maternity consultant. Why would you not? I think it's kind of might be there in another decade. So it's just a new idea that people are kind of getting their heads around.
I totally agree. And it's something I've said, privately to a lot of the other speakers in this webinar series when we talk. It's like, hopefully the information on this series, 5-10 years down the track, it's just going to be like talking 1950s. Like, so yeah. Everyone knows that. Hello.
We know that.
At the moment, it's like, at the moment, we're just on a cusp. We've gone from there being this huge darkness around normal birth and who can do it and how, to, people like my doula, 15 years ago, who was, educating mums like myself who were, wanting to do it differently and learn, to then all these awesome books coming out. And now it's just this big blossoming online of podcasts, courses, thought leaders like yourself, just sharing information. I just cannot see that 5 years down the track, the 100 million or so women giving birth every year, that they're not going to know at least a really good portion of this information, because there's just going to be that dissemination.
It's just redefining normal. It is normal to know that stuff. It's like, when hypnobirthing first came out, and it was all sort of talking like, oh God, it's like it's some hippie-dim thing. Well, no, it's I call it meditative labor. And it's what women have been doing for as long as women have been having babies. This is nothing new. It's just we've got a kind of cool term for it now, but it's nothing new. What is new is that it is now very normal that when a woman goes into labor and gives birth, that it's the first labor she's ever attended and the first baby she's ever looked after. Now, that's not what it used to be. When we go back 50, 100, 1,000 years, where it's all in the village. Back then, by the time you had your first baby, you'd probably attended half a dozen or a dozen labors. So you're familiar with it. But now most women have never been to a labor. So their first labor is their labor. How do you know what's normal? It's scary and frightening. And women have never been so scared when birth has never been so safe. So it's
it's not like we could go inviting our friends to our labors, really, is it? Because I think looking back at my friends, that would have freaked them out. They would have been like, that would have been a bad idea.
No, exactly. It's not normal. Whereas that was, birth was the domain of women, and it would be very normal, not that long ago, and for all of the tens of thousands of years before that, that when you're, that you would be, when it's your turn to be in labor, that you'd have your older sisters there and your younger sisters there and your mother there and your aunties there, and your grandmother would probably be at the foot of the bed telling you to push, because everybody knew birth. And there might be a local village elder who, Wise Crone, who's sort of become the midwife of the village, and she probably learned the skills from her mother and she's passing them on to her daughter. So everybody was more familiar with it all. But now we all know about taking lots of photos of that growing belly to put on Instagram later, the out and the in, which is a real trend. Because I've got like about almost 12,000 followers now on Instagram, which is kind of crazy. But because I only opened the account not that long ago.
Oh my God.
It's just funny watching all these bellies go out and in and out and in, as they hold the baby. But that's kind of become the norm.
Mine's not quite back in. I'm just like, I'm doing Pilates at the moment, right? I'm doing Pilates and I still look like I'm pregnant. And everyone else in the class.
No, you see, no. That's the photos that don't make it online.
No.
And that's where the standard becomes way too high. Yeah, mine never went back out. It just went out and went, oh, we digress.
I don't know what to do. Anyway, we've been had a ball, Kathy. Thank you for being here with us. Hopefully we've covered the gamut of what we were wanting to. Before we go, I just want to ask you a question, because, you're from New Zealand. New Zealand rocks. And, New Zealand's a leader in maternity care. What's going to shift in the world, and how for the rest of the world to catch up with New Zealand?
I think certainly the biggest challenge for that to be possible is healthcare systems, and whether a country works in a welfare system with their healthcare or whether they work with an insurance-based system. Certainly the insurance-based countries, say, I'm just thinking top of my head, but particularly say like Brazil or South Africa, their cesarean rates are just, I mean, they're off the charts. They're like at 95% or something. It's insane, because if you're an obstetrician, well, basically all the women are seeing their private obstetrician and it's all being paid for through their insurance, you know, or they're poor and they're having horrible risk factors in an era of age when we should not have such risk factors on birth. But anyway, so what happens is that as a private obstetrician, you can charge more for a cesarean than you can for a normal birth, and you can schedule it in during a normal day so you can still get to your golf game on time. Whereas, you know, if you are a private obstetrician and you are promoting natural labor, well, that means you're going to be up all night, all the time. You know, like I did personally as a self-employed midwife, did a caseload of around about 70 women a year. And so that would mean that I would pretty much lose a full night's sleep at least once a week. You know, sometimes it would all come on top and there's a full moon and a storm and you've got 3 births in a row. But you know, if why would you want to do that as an obstetrician? Like, when you could just schedule them all as day surgeries. So there's a strong encouragement to the woman to do it that way instead. You know, do what we call vaginal bypass surgery, and keep your designer vagina intact. And but there'll be a reason that the obstetrician will say to the woman that makes her feel that it was the right thing. You know, they might say, oh, well, you know, your baby's quite a decent size and, you know, you're not a big woman. Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, actually, if we scan this baby, it's not large for dates. It's not macrosomic, as we call it. It's just a bony thing. And yeah, I mean, but there'll be a justification within it. I actually have a good friend who's an amazing obstetrician in Brazil. And he's in one of the few hospitals there that have got about 30 obstetricians under him who are all pro-normal. And I said to him one day, how do the rest of the obstetricians feel about you traveling the world and promoting normal and natural and water births? He goes, they hate me. So, you know, so we've got that issue going on. And then, of course, in America, there's just a lot of issues with the fear around litigation and being sued. So, because when a woman has that 1 in 10 chance of a complication with a cesarean, well, they're already aware of that and they've signed forms for that before the surgery. So the surgeon's covered and they're told that the baby may have respiratory distress, but they don't expect it's going to be their baby. That always happens to everyone else's baby. So the litigation is a problem. Yeah. So it's very tricky. In Australia, there's probably not a big reason that your system couldn't be doing what we're doing because we're both welfare countries, but certainly the maternity system in Australia is very different to here. Very obstetric-led.
Yeah, that was my experience with my first baby. My obstetrician was like, oh, we need to schedule for an induction like 10 days early. I'm just like,
why?
What is going on? But yeah, this is the why. And somehow, I think because doctors know each other and family knew him or something, I think it ended up being he wanted to go on a holiday like the day I was due. Or like whatever it was, he'd schedule a holiday that he hadn't told me about, and he just wanted my baby before that. And I was not doing an induction. There's a lot of reasons why I'm not going to do an induction. I'm not saying inductions are.
But again, is the induction better for the baby? No. We know statistically it's not. Yeah. Should only be done for really good medical. There are reasons that induction should be done, but they should be good medical sound reasons.
Yeah, so he did coming to my birth, and he came in his like tennis clothes, you know, because he did actually take the day off, and that was fine, you know. He ended up being there anyway, and baby was born without being induced. But yeah, like they can come up with any reason at all, and you just have to always go back to, yeah, what's best for me, what's best for baby, and educate yourself.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to convince a woman to have a cesarean, because you can do. It's about how you word it, you know, to just put a little bit of fear in there, and they'll just go, okay, if that's what you think, you know. But in New Zealand and the Netherlands and Finland, particularly those three countries, everything is midwifery led. So that means that all women are looked after by midwives who are the experts of normal. And when things are not normal, we refer to our obstetric colleagues, and they, you know, then we become this three-way conversation where there's the midwife, who's the primary caregiver, and the obstetrician, who's the secondary caregiver, and the woman. So there's in some countries, I know, say in America, there's a real kind of midwifery versus obstetrician kind of, you know, fighting each other sort of feeling, and we don't have that at all, or hardly ever, because we deeply respect and admire our obstetric colleagues, and where they come in for their skill set is when things are not normal, and that's where we need their skill set. Our job is to recognize when things are not normal, and their job is to deal with the things when they're not normal. But it's about, midwifery's role is about, what is it? It's not making what is abnormal into normal, and obstetricians should not be making what is normal into abnormal. So it's just that little balance. But the countries where we do work it that way have very good collegial relationships. There's not that, you know, obstetricians love midwives in New Zealand. They don't want to be leaning over a pool catching a baby in the water. They don't want to do that at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's not what they want to do.
That's true. That's true.
It's not their thing, you know. In fact, to be honest, it would scare the pants off a lot of them. Yeah, because I remember I've even had, you know, I've taught obstetricians, because they don't know. They're not taught that. Wouldn't have a clue how to do a water birth. So, you know, some of them they wouldn't have a clue.
So, I mean, from the mum's perspective, having done a non-water birth and a water birth, the non-water birth was way harder, because it's just trying to stay comfortable, trying to stay like pain-free. It's so hard. Whereas water birth, it's just really simple. You hop in a pool and you wriggle around a bit. You know, it's completely. Whereas the other every woman's going to be different and want to be in the water or not in the water. But, you know, for me personally, it was just such a pain relief, and it was just so simple compared to the other birth. You know, it's just so easy. Yeah.
And when you have, you know, that when the woman's had that lovely healthy pregnancy and she goes into spontaneous labor naturally, and you don't fiddle with it, and she's got herself in a really good headspace so that she's not producing a lot of adrenaline, which is, you know, basically adrenaline sort of halts oxytocin. So she's got a really, instead she's not fearful or anxious, and she's having this wonderfully strong oxytocin labor, which is rapidly dilating her cervix. Hey presto, we've got a wonderful normal birth, and it just all flows better. It's just why we talk about the cascade of intervention, but there's also the cascade of normalcy. And when you allow things to be normal, and then that's normal, and then that's normal, and then that's normal, then the chances of things going awry are really, really rare. Really rare. You know, people say, but I worry about, you know, fetal distress. Well, fetal distress tends to happen when women have got epidurals on and oxytocin drips. That's when you see it. Yeah, when you've got a woman who's just laboring naturally, it's so rare. And if it is, it's something that comes, it doesn't like suddenly happen. It's something that sort of over 2 or 3 hours, maybe that baby's baseline starts to increase a little bit, and it's usually because they're head down but not in a fantastic position, so they may be a little bit lateral or a little bit posterior, and but it's really is quite rare. I used to do loads and loads and loads of births at a local birth centre, which is the most gorgeous place, and it's just such a pleasure to, and women are so thrilled. It's an amazing thing to watch a woman when she knows that she's just done that all herself. It's amazing. And you never lose that. It doesn't matter if you're 98, if you're a woman who's given birth naturally and you're speaking to another woman who's given birth naturally, there's this bond that's there because you know what you went through, and it's an amazing gift that you give your baby. Really great start. And if you know you've done absolutely everything in your power, you really have, you've done your research, you've done your homework, you've layered your information, you went to hypnobirthing class, you saw your naturopath, you did everything in your power, and for some reason it ends up not normal, you can put your hand on your heart and go, I know I did everything. It was just how it's meant to be. But the thing that you and I know about, because we talked about it before we started recording, is like that when you know that you didn't really fully engage sometimes with the first, you're a bit busy at work, didn't really have quite so much time, or whatever it is, you know, or sometimes it's just plain fear. And afterwards you go, there's this regret where you go, no, I'm not doing the next time. I'm gonna learn about this next time. I'm gonna take control of this. Yeah, and then so often second births can be very healing because the first birth, they weren't engaged, or they sort of allowed the system to take over it, things sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That totally resonates with me, Kathy. Yeah, definitely.
That's the website.
You know, this. Yeah, a lot could be said about what you've just said, but we should probably wrap it up.
Yes, we've talked for ages. But it's been lovely. We could talk for ages, couldn't we?
We could, couldn't we? There's just so much to say. But thank you for being here. If people want to find out more of Kathy's wisdom, go visit her website, join up with Kathy's newsletter, and
download the birth, organic birth free download. Hop onto the newsletter and take things from there.
Everyone who's watching, if you're wanting to follow Learning to Birth, you can do that on Facebook, Instagram at Learn to Birth, and you can come to the learningtobirth.com website and subscribe to get the additional 30 or more birth webinars with wonderful professionals just like Kathy. So thank you everyone that's listening, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.